Hello, everyone. My name is Trish McCabe, and welcome to Conversations from the School of Hard Knocks. This is a podcast where people from all walks of life will be sharing their stories and the wisdom they have gained from their life experiences. In no way is this show offering any kind of advice or counsel. These conversations will be of a very sensitive nature, so please be respectful in your comments, and thank you for watching. Hello, everyone. My name is Trish, and welcome to the School of Hard Knocks. From Hard Knocks, excuse me. Today, I have my guest, Mike, who has been my guest before, and we're going to talk about the subject of mail messages. This was something that you mentioned to me in our conversations, and I believe we talked about it in the last podcast that we did. And what are mail messages?
Mail messages are messages that men receive as children, messages that they receive that tell them what a man is or what a man is supposed to be. There's plenty of them. Basically, men are tough, men are strong, men stay cool in the face of danger, men don't cry no matter what, men have a lot of sex, men make a lot of money, men enjoy getting drunk and can handle their liquor. I was never good at that. Men are independent. Men take charge and are in control. Men are competitive and win. Men protect their women and children. Men know more and are stronger than women. I mean, as a child grows into adolescence, these are things they're taught. When a young boy cries, the father or others tell them, men don't cry, you shouldn't cry. It's wrong to cry. Which basically also tells them it's wrong to be sad. Men aren't supposed to be sad. We're supposed to be strong and tough, and nothing's supposed to affect us. And what happens is like throughout life, adolescents don't meet the criteria for what men are supposed to be sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And when that happens, it starts eating away at their self-esteem. It starts eating away at their self-efficacy. Like they stop believing in themselves because might not be good in sports, or they might not be coordinated, or they might not be, tough and strong, and they might get bullied and things like that. So this is from a trauma training, like these messages, where I learned this from. And so a lot of men who have experienced trauma or abuse through violence, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, it's hard for them to admit it. It's hard for them to talk about it. So they bottle it in, which usually turns out in either severe depression or severe rage. Depression is
creating a constant inner conflict. I would think if you're told not to do something, if you're told not to be sad, and then you're feeling sad, then you judge that. You're like, oh, I'm sad. And that's bad too. I would think that would really mess with what's going on with yourself to be able to, I would imagine that would be very, very difficult.
It messes with their masculinity. It tells them that they're not masculine, that like their own mind is telling them that because they're going against what they were taught. So there's like a cognitive dissonance going on where they feel bad, they feel weak or sad, or they're not accomplishing things, like they're not getting good jobs or something like that. They don't make good money, and these are things that they're told men have to do. So it attacks their masculinity, which also hits their self-esteem. Everything will just start eating away at the self-esteem.
Yeah, and feeling like you're not measuring up to what society expects of you, what you've been told. And
in that adolescence, they'll start looking for that acceptance elsewhere, in the other kids who have that same stuff going on, and they never talk about it, but they end up doing deviant behaviors like drugs and just delinquent behaviors that kids do. And a lot of these kids are traumatized, or just not meeting the mark of what they feel they're supposed to, either that's been taught to them by their families or their fathers, or they have older brothers. And that's in men. I mean, it's a lot different in women, and I'm not really too experienced in that.
But I wanted to address men because I think, I've I've heard all these things myself, and I saw my brother go through exactly what you're talking about. We talked about that before, and I won't get too much into that, but that conflict of, okay, so if you do have an emotion and you're told not to have it, then you're just really confused because you have this feeling and you're like, but I'm bad for having it. So it's like this cycle of constantly trying to not be and not feel what you're feeling. So of course, it leads to all the things you were saying, the behaviors,
Right. I
drug
mean, and
addiction.
that comes from that cognitive dissonance where we're doing things that we feel are wrong, but we're unable to stop it, or we're engaging in things or engaging in thoughts about ourselves, but in another hand, we think they're wrong. You know, um, so there's like this fight
Mm,
going on internally,
conflict. Hmm.
and and we don't want to feel that stuff. We don't want to feel less than. We don't want to feel weak. We don't want to feel less than masculine. So we seek that elsewhere. So drugs and alcohol will numb that stuff, or give somebody the courage. I mean, with me, I was a skinny, uncoordinated, awkward kid, and started playing in bands at a really young age. And girls would talk to me, and I would be scared to death. I mean, first of all, they were older than me, and second of all, I just was scared to death because of I was always picked on for being so small and everything else. But I noticed after a couple of beers, I could talk to anybody,
Liquid
and
courage.
right, and so it released some inhibitions, and I said things that I wouldn't normally say because I just had this courage, and I started realizing, well, people like me when I'm a little loopy. My problem was I couldn't stop at a little loopy. I just kept going until I got belligerent.
My brother, my brother
Hmm.
had that. Absolutely. Um, Now you had mentioned before that I guess it started to come to light to you personally when you were married and in your relationship with the mother of your
Well,
children.
I was married for 4 or 5 years. I was with her for a year more than that or something, and I mean, she was just completely emotionally abusive. She was very sick. Had a lot of personality disorders. She was like a borderline personality disorder, and she would she had such fear that anything I did that didn't involve her or involve women or other people, or just anything, I was just made to feel bad about everything I did. I mean, I owned a company with between 20 and 50 employees, and I didn't do any of the hiring, but if they hired a real pretty girl and she came in there and saw a new pretty girl there, I would end up in a 5 day long "I don't love you" fight. You don't love me fight. She would be like, "You don't love me. Why are you hiring these beautiful girls? How do I compete with them?" I mean, God forbid my eyes ever met or looked at another girl in her presence. That was another 5 day long "you don't love me" fight, and
Mm.
it ended up in everything. I mean, if I just played with my daughter for
You
an
get
extended period
jealous
of
or
time, yeah,
insecure.
very, very insecure, and just extremely impossible to get through to, because I spent all my time just trying to keep her at bay, not set her off in one of these things, because those 5 day long fights took a lot out of me and her.
Exhausting. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the kids, I mean, the
And the
kids were right
kids.
there and seeing it, and she would get crazy. She would flip tables over, she threw things, whatever, and I never realized that it was emotional abuse, or I wouldn't accept it. I didn't want to accept that I was a victim of abuse, for a while after our divorce. And I mean, I had a lot of stuff going on. I had a really struggling business, and a lot of messed up relationships over that business and things, and always fighting with her even after we were divorced. And I wouldn't come to terms with the fact that I was a victim of abuse. Like, I was in therapy, and my therapist would just lightly suggest it, and I'd be like, That's that. I mean, is that abuse? You really call that abuse? I call it being an asshole, you know? Um, but after, getting in the field and learning, about trauma and trauma informed care and all the different forms of abuse, I started recognizing that, yeah, I am a victim of abuse. And I mean, that goes right back to the male message. I didn't want to face that I was abused by a woman. I mean, because
In
what
what
would that make
way
me?
was she abusive to you? I mean, aside from the fights, but would she talk down to you and things like that? Would she,
Oh, all the
you
time.
know,
I mean, she would say
point
things
things
like,
out or something that she didn't like?
she
Or
used to call me Mr. Premier because I owned a company named Premier Body Accents. And, we had a lot of money and I bought nice things and I wore nice clothes. And whenever she felt threatened because I had people who thought highly of me or something because I had so much, then it would come out, here's Mr. Premier. He's got to be the center of everybody's attention. And I was like, come on, man.
that actually sounds like projection. It's like she wanted to be the attention. It's funny how people do that. They mirror stuff. But anyways, um, so that would make you feel bad when she would say that because she kind of said it in a way that was derogatory. It
Oh
was meant in a
yeah.
derogatory
Yeah. I
manner.
mean, and like I have to admit, I screwed up when we were together married for about a year. Her pregnancy, I mean, I was near suicidal during her pregnancy because it was just her mental health really suffered through it. I mean, she was on Zoloft, like 50 milligrams of Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. And when she got pregnant, they raised her to like 250. I mean, it was just so bad. I mean, she chased me out of the house, yelling at me and stuff. It was just
Mm.
every single day. And I reached a point where I was like, I wouldn't say suicidal, but thinking about killing myself, thinking about getting high, looking for a way to feel better. And I went through the only thing I ever knew other than drugs, which was sex. So I cheated. I went to massage parlors. I cheated a little bit, not a lot. It might have been like 5 times, but got caught. And that was the weapon that was used against me, for years. I never did it again. I felt bad about it. I mean, I wanted to get out of the relationship. I said, I don't want to come back to the same thing because I'm not going to do the same thing again. I'm not going to cause you harm or my kids harm, but I'm afraid what I'm going to do to myself. So I think maybe we should split up. And that was not allowed either. So I was really stuck in this thing
So
for
you're as
like four
damned if you
years.
did or damned if you didn't. If you stayed, you got pummeled. If you left, you got pummeled. You're like,
Right.
I'm trying to do the right thing here,
I mean, I really did. I
Oh,
really did. And I spent, I mean, it just every day was just, how do I not set her off? I mean, if I just buy her this or I just give her $500 to let her go out, if I don't say anything about she spent every penny, you know what I mean? If I just keep my mouth shut and just keep my head down,
walk around on
everything would be all right.
eggshells, basically,
Pretty
all
much.
the time,
Pretty much. Right.
which
I mean,
is
we had,
really difficult I've been there, so it's a very difficult situation to
right. I
be
mean, I was
in.
made to feel bad about everything I did and everything I said. I mean, she didn't work. We had a baby and a young daughter. Her daughter, which I adopted when our daughter was born, was 7 years older than Lauren. And like the baby was in childcare 3 days a week. I mean, she didn't even have a job, but the kid was in childcare 3 days a week, 8 hours a day, so she could have a break. My other kid was in school, and I mean, God forbid if I just said, "Hey, man, I mean, like my closet's kind of empty. It's been like 3 weeks since any laundry's been done. You want me to do it?" That would be a 10-day long fight. You know what I mean? It's like,
Wow.
so I
Where would
learned just to
you
keep my mouth
say
shut. What?
where would you say that the male messages, play a part in your relationship with your ex-wife? I would say that those, because you weren't allowed to feel and you weren't allowed to really admit you were even having emotions even. I guess, and then you can't, you're not okay with expressing and trying to communicate with your wife, and then in anything you do, you can't win. So it was just, you must have been like, at some point, I guess you addressed this then.
Well, what happened? I mean, it was kind of like, so I didn't meet some of the criteria for being a man because I allowed that stuff to go on. You know what I mean? I didn't just tell her to shut up or get out or nothing like that. I really tried to make things work. Um, And that was going against a lot of stuff I learned. You know, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood in a time period where men abused women. You'd hear it, you know, and know
It's
about it, but
almost
never
like the
talked about it.
norm. Right.
It
Yes, me
was during
too.
that time period.
Me
It was
too.
during that time period. It wasn't never talked about. And then here I am getting yelled at and chased around the house and chased out of the house and forced to leave because I just didn't want to fight in front of the kids and stuff like that. So where's my masculinity? Why don't I stand up to this person? Why don't I kick her out? You know, things like that. And that
And so
was
then
really a,
she's yelling at you, and then you're beating up on yourself as well.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I finally got the courage to leave, it was, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was just like the constant, never-ending phone calls every day, every hour, every half hour, just calling me, you know, I don't want this, and I mean, I just couldn't go back. And then it turned into threats. You stand to lose a lot. You have a lot here. We have this house, we have this, and I'm gonna take everything, you know. And she did, you know. I mean, I moved into a house and had a couch and a kitchen table and a TV, and I slept on my floor, and I bought air beds for my kids. But it was really weird because at the end of the day, I mean, she beat the crap out of me when I left, but at the end of the day, I smiled because I knew I wasn't in there with her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you were free. You freed
Right,
yourself of
right.
that
Um,
toxic cycle of trying to please her, and not only you're not pleasing her, but you're like upset with yourself, and
right,
that part, that is so difficult.
right.
I get the scenario.
And
I've
then
been
it,
there.
and then it was years and years of her using the children as weapons. You know, I mean, just telling them things and talking to her friends in front of them about me with
Smear
lies and stuff.
campaign.
Oh,
Mhm.
it was just unreal. You know,
Narcissism,
my
basically.
kids, and when they reached a point where they understood what she was talking about, kind of like shied away from me and didn't want anything to do with me because I hurt their mother. Um, and that's why
Mhm.
I was in therapy. I mean, I was like trying to figure out how do I maintain a healthy relationship with these kids. I want them to love me like they love her, you know, but they can't stand me. I'm the guy who
The
has
bad
rules.
guy.
I'm the guy who she would tell them that I was abusive. Like I would I would punish a kid for doing something. Like my daughter Lindsay, my older daughter, she could be on her phone till 11 o'clock. After 11 o'clock, the phone gets shut down and it's bedtime. She was in middle school, you know. And if I caught her after that, I take the phone away for the night and I ground her for a day or two. And she'd go home and her mom would say, "No, you're not grounded. Your dad's abusing you by doing that. You know, he's being abusive. He's being mean just because he's mad at me." She would tell her things like that, you know, and both of them for years.
And
Um,
because you had those male message things taught in your mind, it just, you played into it, yeah, I get it. And
well, that wasn't meeting the criteria from the way I grew up. You know, the way I grew up, men don't put up with stuff like that. Men shut that down and get out of it. And I know a few men that I grew up with who, like, when they left their wives, they got custody of their kids, and I didn't. You know, and it was just everything was just beating the crap out of my self-esteem. I just felt smaller than anything. You know, for years, I had a business that was a multi-million-dollar company that fell apart. I had a marriage with a four-bedroom house with 4 acres of land and an indoor pool
it wasn't
in
enough.
and I didn't have it anymore either. You know, I mean, I
And then
lost
you
it.
lost it on top of it, right? Oh
Right.
boy.
So yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it was a real struggle, and I mean, I managed to stay clean through it, but there was a long time where I thought about harming myself. Like I
Mhm.
never made a plan, but I mean, I did things that were just as close. You know, I mean, I looked on the internet all the time and did research about what children whose parents committed suicide, like how they turned out. I would, um, I just was severely depressed and went through a lot of anxiety as well. And the whole time I was in therapy, and I didn't talk about that in therapy. I talked about, like, I just bitched and moaned about my ex-wife and what was going on, and bitched and moaned about people who were like working for me and then left and started their own company to go against me, and and go into direct competition with me. And it was just such a hard time. It took I don't even know, when I finally closed the business I went to college and started working. Yeah, we talked about this last time.
Yeah, I
I
love
got
that. I
involved
think
in the
that's
field,
so
and
great.
that's the stuff that started helping me raise my self-esteem and come to the awareness that I was abused. I was a victim of abuse. I was severely traumatized by my marriage. So it's hard to even say it now. You know what I mean? But
Yes,
I
triggers you just
was
thinking about
severely
it. Mhm.
traumatized by 5 years with this woman who just didn't know how to be loved or to love. I mean, she just had such a deep hatred for herself, and just
Mhm.
deep insecurities and fears that she had no idea. And I can't say I knew how to do that either. I mean, I made my mistakes, like I told you. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just so hard, and it was really traumatizing because I was the guy who stayed out of relationships. I was the guy who said, "Well, I'm a musician. I'm a drug addict. Sex comes pretty easy, and I don't want to be one of those guys who has a girlfriend that they're always fighting." That's why I stayed out of relationships. And then when I felt I was ready, I got into this relationship and got married and had kids, and it was just nothing what I thought it would be. You know what I mean?
It's like this dynamic of two broken people, you
Yeah,
know, that
yeah.
don't have even a guidance book of what it is to really be in a relationship because they don't have a relationship with themselves. They don't know
Mhm,
themselves. You know, we're taught a lot in society. This is my humble 2 cents. These things. I mean, my mom, from the female perspective or just from the child's perspective would say, don't cry. I'll give you a reason to cry. Be
mhm,
quiet. Go outside and play. Be seen and not heard. And
mhm.
you develop these very unhealthy ways of forming relationships, and then if you have another person who has a similar experience and neither of you know this is going on, behind underneath it all within yourselves, if you don't have a healthy loving relationship with yourself, how can you give it to someone else? How can you be that for the other person when you're not
Oh,
even able to
absolutely,
be there for yourself, kind of thing? So that's
absolutely.
my humble 2 cents on that. But
Well,
yeah.
and you're right. It's exactly how it is. I
And
mean, I had no idea how to love, and it was never in a real relationship. Um, Growing up in my house, it wasn't a real loving house. I mean, I know my mother loved me. My mother was very, very affectionate towards me until she went back to work. And then I guess she was mad that she had to go back to work, and she took it out on me and my brother. She would come home and yell at us for
resentful.
this, that, and the other thing. And her and my father never were very, they never showed affection towards each other. Not that I've ever seen. Very rare. So I really had no idea, you know.
And they didn't
I mean,
talk either. Nobody talked about anything. And especially people in relationships, heaven forbid. Oh, no, no, no. I always found that, I may have mentioned this the last show, but I always found it very interesting that, music would talk about feelings and experiences and things like that. That's why it was such a safe haven for me to go to, because you could actually feel your feelings, you could actually acknowledge them. But in our day-to-day living, oh no, no,
mhm,
you
right,
didn't bring up that stuff.
right.
And
And,
so what, you
and
get into a relationship and you don't really have very many tools
right. I mean,
to work with.
didn't have much to offer other than I was a good provider. I mean, so you knew me, and I was a good friend. I was a good person. I never had like mean streak or anything like that. And I think that things could have been better, had I been in a relationship with somebody who was a little bit more um, had their stuff together. I think that it could have happened, but just that experience, and with me not having any knowledge of how to deal with anything like that. I mean, I had a lot of people trying to help me. I had a sponsor, uh, and then I had my therapist after her and I broke up. Um, but I really didn't know how to get through it. Like my therapist, God love her, man. I mean, she just would come in there and listen to me and offer these little suggestions, because therapists don't really tell you what to do. They try to have you find what to do.
Right.
And she did a real good job of it. It took a while, it really did, because I was so beat up. I felt so undeserving or unwilling to do some of the things that she suggested to free myself from it all. Because I left her and was not free from her for and it was a long time. It could have been 10 years. You know, I mean, I left her in 2005 and really got my self-worth back around 2015 or 16. So yeah, I mean, and I was
It
not
was a
free from her.
journey. It was a bit of a
Yeah,
journey, and she was very essential and helpful in that.
yeah,
That's so great that you had that. It's hard, you know, I had a good therapist, but I didn't stay long enough to get to that part, I think was what my situation was. But yeah, it's so nice to have a good therapist that sees this and knows how to gently kind of nudge you to doing
right.
healthier things for yourself. Is there anything in particular that comes to mind that really did help you that your therapist recommended? I'm curious.
Um, I guess like so in 2011, I dated this girl who I went to a junior high school with. We connected on Facebook and we dated for about a year, and my business fell apart. Like finally, just fell apart. And then she left me, and I went back into therapy, and we would talk. And I mean, I'd talk a lot about how I'm angry, how I'm never going to trust anybody, how I'm never going to let anybody get close to me again, and things. I don't know how it came about, but I had showed her this picture of me in middle school and junior high school, and she just looked at it. She goes, "Man, you look so angry, so hurt in that picture." And she had said, if that boy was sitting next to you right now, what would you say to him? You know,
Oh,
what would you say to him? And man, after being in therapy with her for a few years and I've never cried in front of her, I lost my shit. I mean, I just for some
out
reason
it
I fell
came.
apart. Huh?
Out it all came. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
man. I just
Hmm.
and you know, I mean, I said some things that I would say, but she had let me go. You know, the time was up, and she had said, "Well, you should spend some time with that kid this week, and look at that picture and tell him the things that you know he needs to hear that he never heard." And I mean,
I just
so
got
she might have
the
been mistaken by
goosebumps.
letting me get out of
Oh,
there a little early because I was fucked up. You know, she opened the wound and
can
it
of
didn't
worms.
close,
Yes.
and I walked out of there just with everything pouring out of me. It was a really hard week, but it was also the start because I did it. You know, I mean, I did what she told me to do,
Hmm.
and I mean, it was hard. I mean, I just remember being in my bathtub just crying, just out of the blue, like everything just falling apart at the drop of a dime that whole week. And but that was like the start of it all, of me learning positive self-talk, about me realizing that a lot of this shit about how I felt about myself wasn't my fault. You know, I mean, it just came from years and years and years of from parents to friends to bullies, all telling me that I wasn't worth anything, you know, in one way or another. Um,
Yes.
and I mean, just when I finally got an understanding that wasn't my fault, you know, and that's a treatment technique to do with people sometimes. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Good Will Hunting.
I love it. I'm choked up because I just what you're saying is so wonderful. This is extraordinarily awesome things to be
Mm,
sharing with people. Yes, it's not your fault. And then also to be able to feel what you're really feeling, to allow yourself
yeah,
to say, you know what, I am sad, I am angry, and to finally she that moment where she let that come, open
right.
that lid, you could really be true to yourself and
Well, it all,
admit to yourself how you really felt all those years about
yeah,
everything.
I mean, it was all in rage. For me, it was rage up until that point. Like everything turned to rage, everything turned to anger. Like I would flip out at people that worked for me on the drop of a dime and then just be vicious. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'd reach a point with my ex-wife where I would just lose it, just start screaming, "Shut the fuck up! Just leave me the fuck alone! Go away!" You know, it just and it was just rage, and I had a lot of road rage at the time, and a lot of rage towards myself. You know, no understanding of anything, and it just deep rage towards myself. And that's what they say: depression is rage turned inward. Um,
Mm.
but that point, and for me to come to realize that it wasn't my fault, that I was, I didn't deserve all that shit as a kid, and you know, coming to terms with I was powerless over what I did in my addiction as well. I mean, there was no way to stop myself. Started forgiving myself, and I mean, God, it was just such a long, slow grind uphill. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
eventually, God worked in my life as well. I mean, get me to work with those kids, and with the stories I told you about working there, and at Sienna House with the men on state parole, understanding that I could have a real positive effect on people through my own experience. I did a TC training when I first started working at Sienna House, the inpatient rehab. You have to be trained, and so they have this training where you spend 5 days almost as a client in a rehab. You have to do everything that they do, and my boss was the trainer, and she had said to me, when you first came to us, and I saw you with the men in groups and things like that, you have this unbelievable strength, and you have this unbelievable way to get your message across that I've never seen before. But I never knew until now that it came from your pain. It came from all that pain that you feel. And I was still, I mean, that was 2015. So I was still in pain. I mean, I was in the very, very early stages of healing. And she said, it comes from all that pain that you feel, that you're in. And I hope you're doing stuff to work on it. And me and her are friends now. We talked about it after that, and I explained to her that I'm in therapy and I'm in recovery and working through this shit. It was just so crazy because I never got that either.
You never real right. How lovely for her to say that to you. That's very acknowledging and honoring to say
Yeah,
something like that when just and also to, you know, turn that thing into an actual strength, like realizing that that's now that you have that, it's actually a tool you can use to benefit you and others in this work
yeah.
that you're doing.
I mean, I do it in a way that's different than anybody else. I don't never really say anything telling anybody what to do or what they're saying is right or wrong or anything. I use a lot of my own experiences and stories. I use a lot of parables. I talk in parables a lot. Like I'll come up if there's a topic, I'll tell a story about my life that relates to the topic, and it's how I sell it. You know what I mean? It's kind of how I sell it when I use my own experience, and they buy right into it. It really helps me rather than trying to teach almost.
I just think that's incredible. I'm over here choked up, you know. I can't help it. This I identify so much with your story. I never became an addict, well, at least not with drugs, but in other unhealthy
Mhm.
things that I did. Um, but I relate so much to when you say that, you know, you were skinny, awkward, uh,
Clumsy.
um, clumsy. That's what
I
I was
trip over
told.
air. I was knock-kneed.
Knock-kneed, duck feet, knobby
I,
knees,
I was so
freckles,
skinny I
buck
had to run
teeth,
around in the
you
shower
name
just to
it.
get wet.
Yeah, yeah, you know, I mean, and made fun of, terribly bullied a lot
Hmm.
all through school, all up into through high school. So I understand that element in this
Hmm.
story greatly. So I think it's really great. I'm over here choked up. I think it's really great, your story. Um, so in the terms of the male messages, um, what would you recommend to men to start the journey of addressing those? What do you
Well,
think?
they're bullshit. They're not true. I mean, it's a lie. It's not that anybody said, well, I'm going to lie to this person to make them strong or anything like that. It's just been passed down through generation, but it's not true. Not every man is strong. Not every man doesn't cry. Men cry. Not every man doesn't get sad. Men get sad, and there's not a thing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with being a man who can't lift 200 pounds over his head. There's nothing wrong with being a man who can't beat another man up. We are who we are.
or
We
doesn't
should,
want to, for that
right.
matter.
I
Not
mean,
wanting to, like you didn't want to hit your wife, you know? You
right.
didn't, even though you
No,
had
no,
said
no, no.
that,
I
you didn't
wanted to
want to
hit
do.
my wife. I just never did. There,
Right.
there were times where I
Chose
really
not to.
did want to. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, but I did. I mean, I don't know any.
Excuse
I
me.
mean, it's how I was brought up. You know, it wasn't in my house, but it was in my neighborhood. My friends did it to their girlfriends, you know, and I was
But
the
you
skinny
chose
guy,
not
so
to. That wasn't something you
right,
you might have wanted to, of course, and but you chose not to. You're like, I'm not going to do that, you
right.
know. But
No, I
other
leave.
people would say, well, why didn't you? And that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Like I
no, I
understand
would
that a
leave.
lot.
It was just unreal to because I knew. I mean, I was at a point where I knew that everything I do has consequences, and I knew if I was to do something like that to her, I would be in jail. I mean, that would be her. Hold on, my kids doesn't understand that when I don't answer her, she sends me a text. Yeah,
Where are you? What are you doing? Yeah, that's the trouble with cell phones now. You can't avoid
yes,
phone calls or text messages. If
no,
they yeah, if they, you know, excuse me. But is there anything else on the topic of mail messages that you would want to tell men that sticks out to you? Um,
yeah. I
a
mean,
bit of wisdom.
find your
Uh,
strengths. You know, I mean, take a real look at yourself and find your strengths. There's strength in not fighting. There's strength in being sad. You know, there's strength in accepting that you are who you are. That's where your strength comes from. You know, and there's strength in talking about it. You know, I mean, talking about it helps so much
oh
more
my
than anybody could
gosh,
ever
yes.
imagine. I mean, we're told not to talk about this shit. Come from an Italian neighborhood. We're told not to talk about anything, you know, and then I get clean and they're saying you need to talk about your feelings or you're going to use. And they were right.
We
But there's
had that.
strength.
I'm Irish, and we had that in my family.
Right,
You know,
right,
you just they took to drinking.
right.
That's what they
Yeah.
have a
Have,
drink.
have,
Here you
have a couple
go.
of shots of whiskey
And it was
and it'll all go away.
encouraged
It'll be
from a
better.
small, I mean, Patty's Day was like our day, you know?
Right,
And
right.
yeah. So
But no, my message to any man, I mean, who's dealing with self-esteem problems, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I mean, you could get out of it. You could come through it if you spend some time. If you spend half the time looking at your positive assets as you do your negative problems, you'll start learning to love yourself. You know, and also you have to do esteemable acts, which is things that you know build your self-esteem. But
reinforce
yeah,
the
right. The,
positive
the
part.
messages that we were taught as kids are lies. Basically, they're just lies. They're not vicious lies told to hurt us. It's just that it's been passed down through generation, and it's just understood. But I mean, it's wrong. And if we live if we live by that code, we will never be able to expose things about us that will help us get better. Because the only way to let some of the good stuff in is you have to let some of the bad stuff out. You know, and that comes from talking about it. It comes from accepting. It comes from being okay with who you are and talking about what's going on.
Addressing it. I would
Absolutely.
love if you would go over those mail messages again. And if you
Sure.
have any comments to say about each one, it would be greatly appreciated. But I love them. Thank you so much. It's
No problem.
very powerful.
So you want me to do like all 10 of them, I guess they are?
Yeah, read them down. I
Okay.
think they're so
So men
great.
are tough and strong and stay cool in the face of danger. I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, we get scared. I mean,
They're
if a guy
human.
twice our size is coming at us with a bat, we're scared, man. Be scared. There's nothing wrong with it.
It's normal.
It's stupid to say to
Who
stay
wouldn't be?
cool. You know,
Yes.
men don't cry no matter what. Listen, man, I tried to live by that for a long time. There's nothing wrong with crying. It doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you more of a man to be able to show your emotions. Real men can show their emotions. Real men can talk about it, and real men will behave better when they're able to talk about their emotions in a healthy way rather than bottle them down and stuff them down until the point of blowing up happens, and then they go off the handle and either harm somebody or harm themselves. Um, and even the men who do that are real men. They just don't have an understanding of it. I mean, I'd hate to take away from any man's masculinity for whatever they do. A man is a man, no matter what they do. Men have a lot of sex. Yeah, so did I, but I didn't know how to love and how to be in a relationship and how to appreciate sex as a part of that. You know, I thought that sex was the answer to everything, and sex was a way to feel better about myself. And it never worked. Um, Men make and have a lot of money. So I had about 4 years of my life where I made a lot of money. Before that, I never made crap, and after that was just a long uphill battle to just get to a point where I could pay my bills on time. Just because I made a choice to work in a field that doesn't pay a lot of money doesn't mean I'm not a man. I mean, I am a man. I mean, I pay my bills on time, and I help people for a living.
Success isn't necessarily about money. If you don't
No,
like what you do, I don't consider that success. You can make all the money in the world,
absolutely.
but if you're not happy, then why are you doing it? This is the only life we get, right? So I identify with that one greatly.
I
Yeah.
wish I had it, but if you ever get the chance to Google it, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who had this wonderful quote about success, and it says nothing about money. I mean, it talks about success is earning the respect or winning the respect of other men. Success is being happy, you know, um, with where you are in life, things like that. I don't know the whole quote. It's about a paragraph. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's
I'll
really
check it
cool.
out. Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah,
Men
success
are
is how
in
you impact people too. You want to feel like you
kind
have
of
a
froze up on
positive
me.
yeah. Sorry about that. Did you get that?
No, that's cool. So I mean, I thought I was very successful when I owned my business and I was making $300,000 a year and lived in that big house, but I was miserable. I mean, on the outside, I made everything look great and stuff like that, but I was in a marriage that I hated. I was miserable and I blew up at people and I jumped down people's throat and then I felt bad about myself. Um, I just wasn't happy. Happiness didn't come until I loved what I did. Happiness didn't come when I went till I realized that I have a positive impact on people that will help them move forward in their life. You know, Happiness came when um, I have the relationship with my children that I always wanted, and I never once gave in. I stayed the strict, rule abiding dad. And they
Mhm.
appreciate me more for that than anything else. So the men are independent. I mean, I think anybody's independent if they want to be. I mean, I was not always independent. I always depended on all my friends. I lived on everybody's couch for years in Los Angeles. I mean, my last year there when I lived with Jeff was the only time I ever lived in a place as long as I did and paid my own bills.
And what that says is
Um,
you can't ask for help when you need it. And
well,
sometimes
right.
it's okay to ask for help
There's
if you
nothing wrong with asking for help,
nothing wrong with
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
and and so I don't think anybody should be totally dependent on anybody else, but it's okay to sometimes need to depend on people to have. I mean, my therapist saved my life. My sponsor saved my life. The Rooms of Narcotics Anonymous saved my life, and I was very dependent on them. You know what I mean? To get me to where I am now, to where I am independent, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, you had a support system. It's
Right.
important.
Men take charge and are in control. Listen, man, when I take charge of shit, I fuck it up. Sorry to use that language, but that's what happens. If I'm not living according to the will of my higher power, and I try to take my own will back and act accordingly, I fuck shit up because I need that. I need that guidance. I need a partner. I need somebody to help me along with that stuff. That doesn't mean I can't, you know, have some form of control and I can't have some form of independence on myself. And when I run a group with 15 people in it, I run the group, you know what I mean? And I am in charge of it and I do facilitate it well. But when I that take charge and are in control, when I do that, I screw shit up, you know. I mean, I
You
always
have
try
a
to keep.
misnomer about what control is, you know?
There's no such
I
thing
think
as
there's
control.
a yes,
It's an
right.
illusion. I mean,
Yes,
you have really no
exactly.
control over it. So the first step in Narcotics Anonymous says we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and our lives have become unmanageable. And basically, the way to apply that principle in my life is when I try to have control over something I don't have control over, I'm just inviting unmanageability into my life. Like when I try to control my ex-wife, you know, by buying her stuff and you know, just being what she wanted me to be, I was miserable. You know, and my life was completely unmanageable because she would fight back. You know, there wasn't enough buying her shit. That was not then it was like you're buying me off. You don't love me. You don't want to spend time. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
anything I did to try to
awesome.
control, anything I have no control over, just brought severe unmanageability into my life.
Love that.
Men are
Excellent point.
competitive and win. Shit, man, I lost so much. You know, and I'm still a man and you know, I've regained a lot of stuff back. Most importantly is the love for myself and self-esteem. Um, and I don't always win, you know. I don't always win. There's sometimes I lose. I mean, I'm dealing with problems, health problems, and I had to take a ask for a medical discharge from this semester because I just don't have it in me to do it right now.
You
And with
gotta take care of
COVID and
yourself.
well, right.
Yes.
And I just made the decision. I'm going to take care of me
Take
first.
good
And you know what? I'm not going to have my master's degree uh, at the end of the summer. I might have it a year later. I mean, so what? You know what I mean?
that's awesome.
Men protect their women and children as they should. But I mean, sometimes we're not capable of it, man. A little 4'11" guy, you know, who weighs 108 pounds, if a big if somebody breaks into their house and they're 6 foot tall and they have a gun, how are you going to protect your children? I mean, yeah, you might stand in front of a bullet, but
And you
I
can't
mean,
protect them from themselves and the
you
things that
can't.
only
Yeah,
they
and
can stop doing, like, that's bad, and choices that, you know, I you can't be responsible for that. I mean, once
well,
the person comes of
absolutely,
age, you know, and
and
even when they're young, they do things, that's their lessons. They have to learn their lessons, and you can't learn them for them, like, kind of
absolutely,
thing. Right.
and men know more and are stronger than women. I have not found a woman that I'm stronger than yet. I mean,
And that word strong, I mean, it's inaccurate. It's another it's
I
worded
I
wrong,
agree.
and it's out of whack,
Well,
for lack of a
women
better
have to live with so much more than men ever dreamed of. They have to live with the inequality. They have to live with, a lot of them have to live with being single parents. A lot of them have to live with sexual harassment and sexual abuse constantly. You know, we don't have to deal with any of that stuff. You know, women are stronger than men 10 times over. It's just the truth,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think, we have the female, you know, uh, it's difficult being, how can I what am I trying to say here? Um, we have a lot of hormonal issues and things like that we have to deal with, and,
Hmm.
that's, things we don't have control over always, and that can be difficult and very challenging for a woman. That's one thing I'll say on the female perspective.
Right, right on.
But yeah. And is that your whole list there?
Yeah,
Anything
that's it.
else?
So that list is
Wonderful,
in the
thank you.
first session of a trauma recovery and empowerment model group, and we're supposed to go over that with the men in it, and then give them stickers like a 1, 2, and a 3, and they have to put the sticker on which one they identify with the first and the second and the third, and then
Oh,
they talk about it. It's really
this is
cool.
wonderful. I think it's fabulous. I mean, this really is why I'm doing this. I just want people like you that know this stuff, have this wisdom, and put it out there for people, because there's so many people that just they don't know this stuff, you know. They don't
Yep,
realize there's another way. They have a choice. There's choices are
absolutely.
available to them. How can you make that choice if you don't know that you have it? So, um, I, like you, grew up in a very I grew up in a very we didn't talk about emotions or any of those things. My stepfather physically abused my mother. My mother was an
Mm.
alcoholic. My mother was abusive verbally. Um, and you just learn a lot of this stuff, but it's like you said, even without all of that, just the basics of, they couldn't teach us what was not taught to them.
All
So
right.
you can't know something you don't know till you know it. And that's why I'm doing this, so that
Good.
other people don't have to wait till they're in their 50s to change their life,
Absolutely.
make improvements, make better choices, love themselves,
Well, if we
accept
could get the
themselves.
parents, if we could get the parents to stop um, teaching the messages that they've been taught to their
Yes.
children, male and female, if if we could get parents to accept children for whatever they are and allow them to be what they are, they're going to grow into what they're supposed to grow into, and there's going to be less depression and less anxiety. Um, and anxiety, I mean, if you look at the millennials, kids from that generation, all of them have anxiety. And a lot of it has to do with their parents and the way they were parented and what they saw in their houses growing up.
And a lot of it is reinforced in society, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
A lot of these messages, male messages and others,
Hmm.
unhealthy messages, are very prevalent in society. So they reinforce that belief. So how do you get out from underneath it when it seems to be everywhere? I hate to say that, but like this
But I
stuff is
see, I,
new.
I
So,
see parents who don't conform to the norm and allow their children to be who they are. I've watched it, many, many times, and it doesn't matter what society says. I mean, if the parents are truly raising their children to be what their children are. And that's according to their children, not according to what they want their children to be. These kids are growing up strong-willed and okay without the anxiety, without turning to drugs, without, being
I mean,
bullies.
a good relationship
You
with themselves, trusting
right,
themselves.
right.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Ah,
Hmm.
I always get so emotional, but I love this. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on this
I
show.
got
Like,
you.
I truly mean that from the depth of my soul.
Anytime.
I love it. And if there's anything else you would like to share, especially with your work, that you think that you would like to come on here and express, to share with others, by all means, the door is always open. I do remember you saying that you're going to write a book. I don't know if I
I've
mentioned that.
been, I've
You've
been
been.
kind of. I mean,
It's going to be a good
it's
book.
all in little short stories, and there's
Yes.
hundreds of them, and I have to put them together or just do it from start to finish. There's a blog that I don't have anybody has access to. I put things on Facebook all the time. I
Yes.
just write sometimes. Um, I could probably put a book together through all of that stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah. All you would need
at
is
some
like an
point, it's going to
editor
come
to
back.
sit down and
Right.
help you work through, the logistical part of it, of, the grammatical and whatnot. But I think that would just be wonderful. I think the world could really use your book
Oh,
and
thank
to
you.
hear your story. And thank you. I feel so blessed. I'm very grateful. And I would love to talk again. The door is always
Anytime.
open.
Same here.
Um, I'm very excited to put this podcast out for others to watch. And for those of you
Awesome.
that are watching, thank you so much. And please feel free to share this podcast with anyone you know. If you know of anyone that might want to be on this show, if you yourself identify with this and want to come in and chime in and talk some more about it, please feel free to message me. My door is open. All right. So it's been a lovely, lovely talk. Thank you again, Mike.
Thank you,
And
Trish.
I know we'll talk again soon.
Be good. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
See ya.
everyone.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.